Welcome to Curiosities Unlocked, where we will be counting down true crime stories, mysteries, we'll throw in some history, along with sliding in some conspiracy theories. Ooh. It's really exciting because this is our very first episode, and it's also our Halloween edition, so I'm excited and I hope that you are too. Today we will be counting down true crime stories that are inspired by myths or movies. So let's see what happens. Coming in at number 10, we have the Slender Man murders, where you often wonder the effects that internet myths have on our psyche, or even the psyche of our children. For some, the figure of an internet myth called Slender Man has been an urban legend that seemed to start around 2009 and started to grow. Slender Man was the intense obsession for 12-year-old schoolgirls, Anissa and Morgan. They obsession just turned deadly. They believed that Slender Man was real and that they would become his chosen ones if they sacrificed their classmate. In 2014, Anissa and Morgan lured a young girl, their classmate, Peyton, into the woods where they stabbed her 19 times. But she miraculously survived by crawling out of the woods. And she survived that horrific attack. Doctors would say that one of the wounds came a millimeter from hitting a major artery. Coming in at number 9, we have the Laughing Jack murders. If you've ever been scared of clowns, this is one clown that will scare you. Another internet legend named Laughing Jack fueled the delusions of a 12-year-old girl in Indiana that set her family's home on fire before stabbing her stepmother, Maria Torres, to death. When her father asked why she had done such horrible things, she explained that Laughing Jack had told her to do it. According to the legend, Laughing Jack, a clown-like character, lures children to their death by pretending to be their imaginary friend, then traps their soul away in an abandoned fairground. The young girl was obsessed with Laughing Jack, and months prior to this incident occurring, she had begged her father for help. She was hearing voices and she had an alter ego. Documents revealed that she was diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. Coming in at number 8, we have the vampire killing. I never thought that there were actual vampires that was consuming blood, but now we find out that there is. Ooh, these stories are deep. I didn't say they were going to be nice stories. So, in November of 2001, British teen Matthew Hardman was 17 years old when he stabbed a senior woman named Mabel LaShawn. After cutting her heart out, he drained some of her blood into a saucepan and attempted to drink it. According to officials, Hardman was spending hours on end browsing websites related to vampires, ritual sacrifices. He became gripped by the delusion that drinking another person's blood would make him immortal, just like the vampires he loved to read about, which drove him to commit such brutal acts on his elder victim. He has since been convicted and jailed for life. Coming in at number 7, we have John Wayne Gacy, the all-time most popular clown. He brought forward the true idea of having a real-life killer clown. And all of the movies has popularized him in horror. Imaginary characters like Laughing Jack
are terrifying, but nothing can match the horror of a real-life killer clown. John Wayne Gacy was a pillar of his community and often dressed up as Pogo the Clown for children's birthday parties. From 1972 to 1978, he drugged, sexually assaulted, and tortured 33 young boys before killing them, and it may have been even more, and hiding their bodies underneath his home. And so he's a scary clown. There has been tons of horror flicks made about killer clowns based on John Wayne Gacy. And since there has been sightings of all of these clowns around, in the U.S. at least, there was sightings that were in South Carolina, reports of a person being dressed as a clown trying to lure children into the woods. Suspicious characters dressed like clowns with white face paint were flashing green laser and enticing kids with large amounts of money. Several clown-related threats, robberies, and close encounters involving children have law enforcement and communities across the country on edge.
At number 6, we have the suicides that are attributed to the shadowy figure called Walking Sam. Walking Sam reminds me a lot of Slender Man.
An ancient Native American legend about tall, sinister creatures that roam the forest with their bodies of their victims hanging from their arms. Walking Sam is said to be able to control minds, much like Slender Man. He uses this ability to lure unfortunate souls to their death by convincing them that they no longer are worthy of living, which then drives them to attempt suicide. In the first 3 months of 2020, 103 young people between the ages of 12 to 24 tried to take their lives on the reservation called Pine Ridge. These attempts, which sometimes took place during mass gatherings, led to the death of 9 people.
For number 5, we're going to Louisville, Kentucky to look for the legend of the Goat Man. Makes you wonder, why is anyone looking for a half goat, half man?
I want to say that the Goat Man legend has been all over the country. There's multiple sightings of this Goat Man, and it's not just in Louisville, Kentucky. The Goat Man is also known as Pope Lick Monster. The Goat Man looks like something between a goat and a human. It is said to be a tall creature with features that resemble the animal it's named after, including goat-like legs, long horns that stick out from his furry head. In the past 4 years, 4 different teenagers have died while searching for the local legend, often because the teens had to walk along the railroad tracks and they ended up getting hit by a train. Most recently, a 26-year-old woman named Raquel Bain and her boyfriend were visiting Louisville to take a haunted tour of the Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Before the tour started, they heard about Pop Lick Monster's myth, and curious, the two made their way up the train tracks when the train surprised them, and she fell to her death while crossing the railroad bridge. Scary story. I'm still wondering why people are looking for this Goat Man.
Number 4, the tampered candy trick. Do you remember the time where you used to have to go to the police station to have your candy checked, or that your mother went through your bag of candy to make sure that any candy that you got from trick-or-treating wasn't tampered with?
When Halloween arrives, it's a common topic on local news stations. The treats with cruel tricks hidden inside, like poison, sharp objects, needles. It's not as common as the anchors would have you believe, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't happened in real life. The first actual case of such an event occurred in the year 2000. Actually, I think it may have occurred a little earlier than that, because there was a case where a dad had given his son some poison candy, and that is when the first story of like Candyman had came out. But 40 years after the first warning against the poison candy began to circulate, on Halloween night of that year, a man named James Joseph Smith gave out handfuls of Snicker bars with needles hidden in them, leading to one child being injured. Thankfully, no deaths were reported, and Smith was charged for his crime. And like I stated, there has been a lot of stories that you can see throughout history where things were done to candy, but nothing where any kids were severely harmed. In the beginning of this, I told you about having to take my candy to the police station to have it monitored to make sure nothing metal was inside of it. Weird times, I tell you.
2, 3. We have Mike Myers and the robbery gone wrong. It's nothing like, 1, being frightened of Mike Myers, and 2, thinking that he's actually coming for you.
Ever since the first release of the very first Halloween franchise, evil slasher villain Michael Myers has been every bit as a nightmare-inducing as he is iconic. Add a drug-fueled psychotic episode to the mix, and you'll have a recipe for a disastrous event that took place in 1982, a year after the sequel was released. While committing an cocaine-fueled armed robbery in the home of a couple in their late 60s, a man named Richard Delmer Boyer claimed to experience a drug-induced flashback of a scene from the movie. Believing he was being attacked by Michael Myers himself, he murdered Aileen and Frances Harbitz.
Number 2. That's 4. 2. Number 2 on our list is murder inspired by Crystal Lake's very own Jason Voorhees. Enough said.
Not much is known about the exact events of Halloween night 1988, but authorities were able to gather enough information to come to some pretty good conclusions of what they think may have happened to the 18-year-old college student Sharon Gregory. She apparently was performing some kind of psychological study on a young man around her age named Mark Branch. Mark was a deeply disturbed person, and it was well known that he had a fixation on the lore surrounding Jason Voorhees, the villain from the Friday the 13th series. Branch had undergone years of psychiatric treatment prior to the murder, but evidently his obsession and such a fantasy that involved, he had this fantasy that involved him committing a murder while dressed as Jason from Friday the 13th. The police, Sharon's twin sister found her stabbed to death in her home with a hockey mask and black boots nearby. But also, Mark Branch had also committed suicide.
Last, number 1 case on this list is the case of the Warlock. When you get kids to handle your dirty work, what does that say about you?
Inspired by a ritual in an obscure horror film from the 1989 movie Warlock, a 14-year-old boy named Sandy Charles enlisted the help of an 8-year-old friend to murder another child named Jonathan. After the pair killed the victim, who was only 7 years old, Charles tried to boil strips of Jonathan's flesh because he believed that by doing so, he could recreate a magical flying potion that was featured in his favorite movie. The teenager pleaded he pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. His 8-year-old victim was not charged at all. But after that occurred, they started to unravel all of the details about what happened to this young 7-year-old boy, of what they did to him. And it's horrific, and I'm not going to go into the details, but please monitor what your kids are watching and what they're doing.
That is it for our 10 actual crimes that were inspired by myths or movies. Please subscribe, like, and leave a comment below just to let us know what you thought about these stories. Were any of them new for you? Have you ever heard of these before? Were you scared at all? I'd like to thank you for watching and listening, and I hope that you return. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.